Welcome to the Sports Startup Digital Debate Competition, brought to you by Pitch Madness and in partnership with the Sports Biz Group. My name is Tyler Kelly, founder of Pitch Madness, and we're really excited to bring you another 2 opening round debates. We have some amazing founders and judges for you to listen and learn from as they square off head-to-head to debate various topics in the sports industry. But before we get underway, a big shout out to our team. First up, Nadal Harvey, studio engineer who has brought all this amazing content to life, and Nick Hayden, founder of the Sports Biz Group and my partner in crime in getting this project off the ground. Lastly, the main goal of this tournament is to support and promote the amazing founders competing and helping them connect to valuable resources and potential investment to get their company to the next level. Additionally, please support our Pledge It campaign, raising money for the CDP COVID-19 Relief Fund going to help frontline workers in the healthcare industry. We've already raised $2,000. Help us get to our next goal of $10,000. Donate whatever you can. Please hashtag #DebateForCovid to spread the word. All right, are you now ready to introduce our founders? This founder is using the power of AI to keep me from ever betting on my Wizards to win again. Give a Canadian welcome to Kelly Brooks and Quarter 4.
Hi there, my name is Kelly Brooks and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Quarter 4. Firstly, I want to thank you for being here to support COVID-19 relief efforts. I truly hope everyone around you is healthy and safe. Quarter 4 is an artificial intelligence platform that runs hundreds of models in order to predict team and athlete performance in just seconds. With voice integration, you can even get it on your Google Home. We are here and we exist to disrupt the antiquated tips and tricks industry, otherwise known as the sports betting resource industry. Traditionally, this industry has been biased and dishonest, and we are here to make that industry transparent with artificial intelligence modeling and the cleanest data available. Thank you again for tuning in today.
Did you ever think it would be a solid idea to buy the Baltimore Ravens during the regular season and sell them right before the playoffs? Well, wait no more to trade teams like stocks with John Culver and FanVest.
Hey, my name is John Culver. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the FanVest Wagering Exchange, Inc. Our mission is to build the stock market of sports. For too long, there have only been 2 options, fantasy sports and sports betting, for sports fans to profit from their sports knowledge. Both suffer from costly inefficiencies, yield low to negative average returns on investment, and both still pit the player against the house or force the player to play really expensive rakes or VIGs. We believe a new way to invest in sports, situated between both markets, that combines the best elements in the fun and the strategy and the fandom that you can find in each with the power of markets and exchanges. Think Robinhood meets DraftKings, and we are going to be the new way that you will invest in sports.
Thank you, founders, for those introductions. Let's kick it over to our head referee, Nick.
Welcome everybody from around the world for you tuning in to the Sports Startup Digital Debate Competition. We've selected 16 startup founders and we are in the Sweet 16 for the sports betting and gambling section. We have 2 amazing startup founders, Kelly Brooks, the founder of Quarter 4, and John Culver, the founder of FanVest Wagering Exchange. So how this is going to work, we're going to do a coin flip. So we have heads and tails to choose which one if you would like to receive the questions first. So Kelly, would you like to have heads or tails?
Heads.
Heads. All right, it is tails. So John, would you like to receive?
I'll defer, I guess.
Okay, so Kelly, you'll be the first one to answer the question. You'll have 30 seconds to respond. And then John, you'll have another 30 seconds to give your opinion, and then you can go back and forth. Does that sound fair with you all?
Sounds good.
Awesome. All right, so Kelly, first question for you. If games are playing without crowds, how will that impact teams, games, stats, and records? And does home court have any advantage?
Okay, so definitely if there's no crowds, stats are going to be affected. The games are going to be affected. We all know that home court advantage, even in football, there's a 3-point there that is assigned back to home court advantage. Even with quarter 4, we assign 30% of winning advantage back to home court advantage. So home court advantage, a lot of that focuses on crowd. It's on travel time. There's a lot of variables that go into home court advantage. And most importantly, part of this is the betting game. The betting game is going to be seriously affected because home court advantage is taken into account by a lot of bettors. So if you have comeback momentum that's driven by home court advantage that make bettors bet on the underdogs, all of a sudden we're going to see a lot of bettors moving towards betting on favorites. Sports books are going to have to adjust their lines for that. So even if it's just temporary, there are going to be some effects with no crowds in the game.
John, and your counter?
Yeah, actually, I think there's sort of been a sort of myth of the actual statistical effects of home advantage. And commonplace, for all of us as sports fans, we think that it's the noise and the sound and really is the primary driver. But a lot of studies have shown actually from, look at major kind of American sports leagues like the NBA and the NFL, a steady decline from, let's say, a home field advantage of winning percent around 60%, kind of in the 70s, all the way down to around 52%, looking at kind of like the NFL and the NBA. And the primary culprit from that actually statistically and empirically has been the quality of officiating and the new checks and refereeing and officiating. So I'd say without home field like advantage, noise certainly has an influence, but it is far, far less than the influence of like the kind of calls that people get, officials not deciding to make calls. So I believe that like the greatest impact really comes down to officiating more so than crowd noise.
Nice. And Kelly, do you have any counter to that?
Yeah, I did read about the officiating point, but home court advantage is not just about crowd noise. There's other things that are taking play there. There's a neutral court now that instead of home field that we might be faced with, you're going to be playing on a neutral field. So you don't have the fans cheering and you don't have the travel time. So I think home court advantage, it's going to decline the effect of home court advantage. So in the end, again, I think the biggest game is the betting game. And even if it doesn't directly affect stats, it's going to affect the way that the bettor bets. And that's going to directly affect my business as well.
John, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd first say I don't disagree that bettors will still handicap differently, based on, I think, again, some of the myths around the empirical effect of crowd noise versus the quality of officiating and the quality procedures that exist with the kind of review. So once like the NFL started putting in, challenges and reviewing plays, there was a further decline in actually winning percentage by home field teams. So I think it'll be a very interesting experiment, and depending on that, and also, Kelly mentioned travel. The effect of travel is one of these things that has also been estimated to have greater impact, particularly in the NBA. They're doing a lot with schedules, oftentimes the kind of back-to-back or, playing a lot of games on the road. There's certainly effects on, the players' circadian rhythms, their ability to kind of give it the same kind of effort compared to that home team. But I think, ultimately it really is actually, if you look kind of at the data, it's much more correlated to the quality of officiating, the procedures that leagues put in, than it actually is to noise. And I think that's hard for all of us to believe as sports fans because we're all there and, athletes talk about it, but the data tell another story. And that's one of the things that certainly won't stop people from, keeping a certain inflated point for the handicap home margin when they're doing their, analysis. But I think, the results might look a lot like they did for the last few years when you're looking at the NFL, MLB, and NBA. And I think it would be a great kind of test case for that as well.
Great answer. So the next question would be, are you for or against the legal betting age dropping to 18? And John, you'll start with that question.
Great. Yeah, so I'm in support of dropping the legal age to 18, primarily because that activity, that is, sports betting, is going to go on in colleges and universities with that demographic regardless. Both men and women, especially with the kind of increasing permeation of sports betting and data and analysis going into all kind of traditional sports media, And why not take the opportunity to bring some of these folks in at a ripe age into the light, into this new sort of infrastructure we're building for legalized sports betting in the states rather, as opposed to having them, get hooked up with some offshore bookie or some situation that, might be a little bit sketchy. There aren't going to be many things that are going to move them from that offshore book when we're looking at, them graduating college, university, or moving into the next phases. So I think it provides a great opportunity to start, widening the funnel, getting people who are going to be doing these activities regardless, and bringing them into the fold into a kind of a new legalized sports betting landscape.
Great. Kelly, and your answer?
I support it as well. I'm a very big fan of the transparency, the consumer protection that legalization brings into the game. So we know that 67% of college students are gambling right now. A large percentage of those are doing so illegally. If we legislate, it means that the organizations and, colleges and other places have to introduce rules and regulations, into their own, organizations to support people. So if somebody does get a gambling addiction, 6% of college students do, they can now get support through that because it's legal and there's regulation around, requirements to support. The other piece of this is if it's legislated, organizations like ours, progressive North American organizations in the industry can directly sponsor and contribute to these programs. So we start to eliminate the taboo, and then with progressive infrastructure and interfaces and transparency that AI, and progressive platforms bring, we educate the bettor, we help them make safer bets, and we put safety measures into place. So I think that's really, really important.
John, anything to counter onto that point?
No, just to add, really, I completely agree. And for us, being at FanVest Wagering Exchange, having a real kind of market-based sort of investing-like style component, one of the things that we really believe will be beneficial to this kind of new legalized space is setting up, to Kelly's point, some of these regulatory bodies, combination of sort of self-governance along with some of these public institutions. A great kind of analog is FINRA in the sort of investment space in the broker-dealer world. That's a public-private institution. And the more kind of infrastructure we can build so that intrastate activities can go on, education about, the risks associated, sort of the same way that we regulate and organize around other typical kind of vice industries, I think we can really do a lot in terms of its, publicity for it, and also just sort of credibility for the growth of sports betting. And I think these kind of organizations would be really, really excellent and a good way to kind of organize strategy, but also to create this kind of educational funnel and infrastructure that I think could really benefit the activity of sports betting.
Great. And so the next question would be, do you think esports would draw a new audience to the sports betting world, or does it just give an existing competition for existing sports bettors to place bets on? And Kelly, you'd be the first one to answer this question.
Yeah, so I really feel with this one that esports is going to bring aboard new bettors predominantly, and there's a few reasons for this. Right now, when you look at the statistics, 95% of esport players and fans are also traditional sports fans, but this isn't necessarily reciprocated. In March, we saw a huge spike in sports bettors betting on esports, but then that quickly dived because I think that once traditional sports fans got in there, they realized that they were at a disadvantage because they didn't really find themselves aligning with the sport and understanding the sport. So I really think that esport bettors will bet on esports. Innovation's going to change this. I think that, to understand esports, you need to play the game. So right now there's a lot of different data points associated with players, things that traditional sports bettors don't necessarily understand. I think innovation is going to change that, though. I think we're going to be able to build platforms to make that information more easily accessible to traditional sports bettors. So I think initially we're going to have esports people betting on esports, but that probably will start to trickle over into traditional sports betting with the education that comes with that, with the hype as well.
Great. And John, your answer?
Yeah, I respectfully disagree. I think esports is going to be, and it already is, but a massive market with different users as their primary sort of focus being esports. There's estimates right now looking at sort of 2024 being around $13 billion addressable market. But the average composition of a lot of those esports players is different. China is the fastest growing place for esports. Internationally, the US lags right now in terms of esport growth and popularity and betting on it, but behind a few other countries like, in Europe and Spain. And I really think that the onus is on all of us who kind of have our origins or foundations in sort of the sports betting or sports as an investment world to really be smart in the next few years and to make plans to carve out a separate offering for the esports bettor. I don't believe that there will be a lot of kind of penetration from the esports world into traditional sports world, because that market is just the kind of growth and differentiated in a way that's very different than sports. And a fan who is like an esports player first, I think in terms of when things go a little bit more back to normal, they're not going to just instantly kind of get back into the sports world, as kind of Kelly was saying, after March. And I think the onus is really on us to look and recognize this as a different industry, similar sort of attributes, but something that we're going to need to cater to versus vice versa.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing, John. I think that immediately we're not going to see traditional sports fans betting on esports. It's up to us as an industry to make it more accessible, through easy information. The one thing I do want to add, though, is that esports is making traditional sports more relevant. You now have young athletes, playing on Twitch, and you have traditional esports fans and players going, "Oh, wow, that's cool. These athletes are playing," and that crosses them back over into the traditional sports world. So I think there's definitely, some transfer over there as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that all flushes out over the next few years.
Great. And that's all the time we have, but we do have one more overtime question. So what do you think is the most radical change that will come from this pandemic on the sports betting industry? And John, I'll let you go first on that one.
Sure. So I think that it's going to prove the need for companies like ours at the FanBest Wagering Exchange for a differentiated, innovative experience with sports as an investment. I think what this pandemic has exposed, sort of with the suspension of sports, the limitations from the sports betting world and the fantasy sports world of these two kind of primary experiences being the sole drivers. I think that the market to the potential market that we can address in terms of when you're looking at sports fans who don't bet or play fantasy is much larger than just trying to look at the universe of existing sports bettors or some of the existing daily fantasy players who might cross over. And I think the need for kind of a new, intuitive, accessible experience that caters to both the people from the sports betting world and the fantasy sports world need to be expanded. And to do that in a marketplace very similar to kind of the growth you look at some of these consumer exchange or market-driven apps like Robinhood and StockX for shoes. There is a massive demand out there for something that makes an experience like this more accessible and more fun. And I think the power of markets can really do that. And I think that, along with other differentiated, innovative experiences, are going to be in heavy demand now as the consumer will be on the sidelines and wanting to integrate and engage more from home and in the digital marketplace.
Great. And your answer would be, Kelly?
Yeah, so we call COVID-19, we call it the COVID curveball at quarter four because, initially it spun us around. We were flailing a bit and going, this is the absolute worst thing that could happen. But as we've navigated this, because, we did put our heads down, we did some research, and we realized not too far off from what John's saying is that, there is a huge demand still for sports, but we need to cater to that differently. Whether there's fans in the stands or, whether, we're watching everything through streaming, we need to have interfaces that connect to that experience. We need to be able to cater to the bettors. We need to be able to cater to the esports fans. We need to be able to cater to the traditional sports fan. So all of those areas need to come together with new progressive ways, whether that's through mobile, whether that's through VR, whether that's through, strictly streaming. We really need to understand that globally we can connect through online, not necessarily, through the stadiums, which are very important, but we need to be disruptive here. We really need to cater to everybody who isn't able to go to a stadium, even when we get back to normal. We really need to focus on that.
Great. Anything to add to that, John?
Yeah, no, I agree completely, especially when you look at, here in 2020, business is digital, experiences are digital. And while going to games and stadiums, are certainly a segment and a sort of part of the experience, that's not even the tip of the iceberg. That's less than the tip of the iceberg when you think about how many people are consuming all of these sports and engaging them digitally. And much like kind of on Wall Street, how, the way that bonds and sort of stocks and funds were discussed or kind of written about, the sports betting world, I think, is really going to be in for a rude awakening if they don't start looking at themselves and how we're using these old kind of money line quotations, the kind of costs that are prohibitive, versus looking at the way that companies like Robinhood were able to demystify the investment process, make it fun, gamify it. And I think that the kind of existing betting infrastructure certainly will cater to a wide group of people, but it really is selling itself short when it looks at the kind of big picture and the greater opportunities there. That evolution is going to come, and it's really going to be important, I think, for operators to be ready to kind of leverage the total power of this kind of experience that we can deliver to people. And I think that's the way forward.
Great. Thank you for that. That's all the time we have. Great debating from you two. And for all those listening, use the hashtag #DebateForCovid. Let us know who you think won that debate, and we'll see you at the next round.
And let's introduce our judges. First up, Mark Coleman, ex-Googler and managing partner at Tambora Ventures. Next is Kristen Kuliga, Executive Vice President of Business Development for Vanguard Sports Group, as well as Managing Director at Charlestown Holdings. And lastly, Scott Powell, Associate at 76 Capital. Let's kick it over to our head referee, Nick.
All right, that wraps up an amazing debate that we had for the Sweet 16 in the sports betting and gambling section with Kelly Brooks and John Culver. So now we're going to go into the judges for their opinions on their picks and their analysis. So let's start this off with Mark. Who did you think was win after you give your quick analysis? That would be great.
Sure. Thanks. Great. Both Kelly and John did awesome work presenting both their cases. Questions were really agnostic in terms of where you were driving it towards. When I look for leaders and founders of companies, I look for people that can drive the conversation, the narrative, but not just spew out different facts and stats around the universe that they're in. And I felt that Kelly really became this narrative around the space that you were presenting to and was able to defend each case there. Also, it was interesting in terms of controlling the narrative. I felt it was interesting when you flipped a coin and John had an option to go first. I always felt you have control of the environment to jump right in and control it instead of being defensive and trying to respond to everything Kelly was saying. And then going back to a few of the questions, I thought Kelly really responded outside of the box a little bit of the narrative and showed a little bit of a disruption of what she was looking for. And finally, the reason I chose with Kelly, I felt that she set expectations, for the audience, and not leave it as such a positive arena, but to see where expectations should lie.
Thank you for that insight, Mark. And so that makes it where Kelly has one vote. And we'll go to Kristen for your analysis and then your vote.
Sure. I agree with Mark that both did an amazing job and it was very informative. I felt as though I do like to sort of go second, and maybe that's sort of more of a negotiation where I like to see where everything comes together, so I can kind of come in there and respond and not over or under sort of market where it was supposed to be. But I did really like the fact that John knew the statistics involved in what he was doing. I also like the fact that I had an understanding of what his business does, whereas I don't believe Kelly brought in a lot of what her business does into the conversation, and thought that was very informative. I did think that Kelly came back really strong after the initial question, and really believed that she at the end was neck and neck. But I would go with John.
Amazing. So now we have a tiebreaker once again in the sports betting and gambling. So one vote for Kelly, one vote for John, and it comes down to the final vote. And Scott, you're going to be the tiebreaker on this. So could you please give a quick analysis and then followed by your vote?
Yeah, awesome. I mean, just to echo Kristen and Mark's sentiments, great job, both of you guys. It was really awesome just hearing you guys go back and forth at it. Referring to my notes a little, the first question, I think you guys both made a lot of interesting points on how games would be affected. John, I think you're absolutely right in terms of how we measure home court. It might not be a real thing. Kelly, I think you're absolutely right in terms of how home court advantage can affect the spread and things like that. I do wish things like were mentioned were things like player psychology, line of sight, things like that, how that might affect statistics. But in general, I think you guys did a both job of, kind of expressing your different views and good information backing it up. Regarding the second question, I agree with both of you. I do think the age should be dropped. And what I think is really important, Kelly, what you mentioned is the integrity side behind it. 67% of people already are gambling legally. Like John said, why not monitor this? So I think you guys are both really on the right track with that, and definitely echo both of your sentiments on that. Regarding the third question, whether esports can kind of lead to a new outlet of bettors, this is where I personally believe that esports, well, that was the question, will esports draw a new audience? I think it personally will, and I think Kelly threw a good stat out there that 95% of esports enthusiasts are also regular sports fan, and I think it's important to understand the current demographic of esports fan, a little younger. So once these kids are of age, are 21, 22, and legally about to bet, I think that is going to add a whole new population of sports bettors that are primarily esports bettors and might expand over to the esports industry. I think your first two questions were very similar, but I think Kelly got me on the third question as the deciding factor, so I'm going to go with Kelly as my winner.
Well, that wraps up the votes, and congratulations, Kelly. You've earned a ticket to the Elite Eight for the sports betting and gambling section. Appreciate all the insight and votes that you guys casted for. Thank you, Scott, Kristen, and Mark on that. But congratulations to Kelly. Good fought battle by John, but we're moving on to the next round, and we'll see you there.
From Wall Street to Ball Street, this former investment banker traded in his suit for a hoodie and has been making markets dance ever since. Give it up for Scott Sentimentario and Ball Street Trading.
Hey guys, my name is Scott Sentimentario. I'm the CEO and founder of Ball Street Trading. I have almost 20 years of investment banking experience that I brought over to the gaming space, creating Ball Street Trading, which is a real-time prediction market that lets fans compete against each other in real time as they're watching any event live. Our focus isn't on fantasy and isn't on sports betting. We actually position ourselves as a marketing company that looks like a gaming company by leveraging the attention we get intra-game and bringing brands in to speak with our players live as they're watching these events unfold. Look forward to seeing everyone during the event. Best of luck to all the competitors. We'll see everybody on the other side.
We Profit once told this founder to head across the pond if he was to beat the odds of the bookmaker. He never looked back. Raise your hands for Dean, Sisson, and Profit.
Profit is a secondary marketplace for sports bets where users can buy and sell percentages of bets. So the problem is that sports bets, they rapidly fluctuate in value, often every second. But right now, users currently don't have a way to optimally cash out on their bets' changes in value. And that's where we come in.
Thank you, founders, for those introductions. Let's kick it over to our head referee, Nick.
All right, welcome everybody from around the world from where you're watching this. This is the Sports Startup Digital Debate Competition, and we are in the Sweet 16 for the sports betting and gambling round. We have two amazing founders. We have Scott Samanterio, the founder of Ball Street Trading, and Dean Season, the founder at Bet Profit. So how this is going to work is we're going to have two debates. We're going to do heads or tails to decide who can receive the question first. So Scott, would you like heads or tails?
We'll take tails.
Tails. It is tails. Would you like to receive or defer?
I'll defer.
Defer. Cool. So Dean, you'll be the first one to respond. You're going to have 30 seconds to respond for the first question. And then after that 30 seconds, I'll come in. And then Scott, you'll have your shot to respond to that. Does that sound fair?
Cool.
Let's do it.
Cool. Let's do this. So for the first question, we'll put 10 minutes on the clock. First question is, are you for or against that the current sportsbook model is what we know is over, or is there a new model that will come from this? So what would be your answer, Dean?
So I definitely don't think it's over. It's definitely here to stay. 30 seconds here. I'll stick to my main point of history predates that. In the United Kingdom, a little company called Betfair came along 20 years ago. Sportsbooks thought that was the end of them, and they spent a lot of money lobbying against them. They couldn't beat them, but however, Betfair struggled in a lot of areas, and it's why sportsbooks are alive and they still dominate the UK today.
Scott, would you agree or disagree with that?
I think on some level there's certainly always going to be a need for the European or Nevada style sports book where someone walks up to window, but I think as we look to evolve through technology and the accessibility for new innovation to come out, therefore pulling away the need to have something like a negative 110 or a 10% spread or vig put on a lot of these sort of issues that we have with people putting bets on, is a really easy way for that to pull apart and begin to create different ways for people to interact with sports and experience sports betting in new and innovative ways. I think technology wasn't there, and if you use the Betfair example, Betfair is still a very dry platform. It's likely more reason that it didn't catch on from a user engagement perspective or from a UI perspective than anything else.
Dean, anything to counter to that?
Yeah, I think it completely caught the user's attention. It's the best straight product, betting product in the world. It's in 90 countries. It encompasses straight bet-wise more than 25% of the market there. I think you're absolutely right in minus 110. That model is not here to stay. The advantage for consumers is better pricing, and you get that with a peer-to-peer model with an exchange like a Betfair. But you look at Betfair, and there's a reason why there are still sportsbooks out there, and it's because even with all the liquidity in the world out there, you can't bet on, LeBron James to have over 1.5 steals at the price you want to on a Betfair because there's just not enough liquidity out there for it. And they're in 90 different countries, and they use one liquidity pool and one bet matching engine. So even in the US, you can't match that type of volume globally that they have. So again, I don't see a way that sportsbooks are leaving. I really don't, especially when you factor in parlays, especially when you factor in teasers. You're factoring in alternative lines where you want to buy points. Those markets are just not liquid enough across the board. And again, it's why you're going to have sportsbooks alongside of your differentiated models, alongside of your secondary marketplaces, what we are looking to come in as, your peer-to-peer models, your other financially driven, target market focused platforms. So again, my overall answer is I don't see a way you can get rid of them, especially my last point here with the lead that they have right now with all the money they have that they're sitting on.
Certainly no one's going to defend the position that the incumbents have in this industry. I think what the reality of this innovation will ultimately bring will be new players into this space. I think when we consider the U.S. specifically, with all of the challenges from a regulatory standpoint with the Wire Act currently in place, when we focus on the brick and mortar style of sports books, can they outrun the issues that are now going to come from a post-PASPA, where everyone's now trying to create mobile first, where there are certain states and certainly companies that are going to be dragged into the muck because they can't keep up with only having brick and mortar business models up and running. I think those are going to be the cracks that you're ultimately going to see, where you have outside players. I know there seems to be this cavalry of startups, us certainly included in that conversation, that want to try to get in there and create what the new world's ultimately going to look like. But certainly when we think about, to your point, this peer-to-peer exchange model, who's to say that retail brokers don't ultimately get into this stake, or those big technology companies that now are looking to start buying rights, like Amazon just picked up streaming for a couple more years before all the big rights begin to come out on the NFL, to where you have new players in the game, where you potentially have the Wire Act come down, and you now have the ability for some sort of federal framework to then go forward from a mobile perspective. And the reality of these incumbents are so entrenched in this brick and mortar style of the conventional window sportsbook. That's where I think you begin to bleed and have this change come. And this is still going to take a lot of time for this all to evolve out. I think we can certainly agree that this isn't a couple of years. This is probably 5 or 10 years out.
Absolutely. I think it's going to take time. And I think, in this question, the current sportsbook, I think there's two ways to look at that. One, what you're talking about is brick and mortar. And yes, that's definitely not the future, right? Obviously, we're all going online, we're all going mobile. You'll still have your retail sportsbooks, because there is, a fun factor of entering a luxury sportsbook and losing all your money in a weekend and partying all weekend at Vegas. We still love that as human beings, but you see the MGMs of the world, they're moving online. They have 2% market share in New Jersey. They're getting
if they're able to get access to those online markets. And I think the reality of the market is still very much hanging on to brick and mortar, whether they want to or whether the regulators are forcing them to.
Well, you still need brick and mortar, because in order to get into a state, you need to partner with said brick and mortar casino. And what they do is they take care of a lot of the problems on the server side, state by state, and then they also take care of the overall license. So you still need them, so they'll still be around. That being said,
let me jump in real quick. This could go to our next question and maybe narrow the focus a little more. So what's the sole focus that needs to change about the current sportsbook model to either draw more casual bettors or become more mainstream? So kind of, you guys are talking about the traditional sportsbook. What's the number one thing that needs to change that you guys are referring to?
I think there's a number of things that ultimately need to change, and I think certainly the experience of which fans are ultimately engaging with that experience of watching sports needs to be really focused and looked at it through a lens using today's technology. If you look back to where sports started, or sports betting started 50 to even 100 years ago, they had very limited tools to create the process of which we still use today in Nevada and in Europe. So our ability to now focus on specific tastes and preferences is, I think, going to be the biggest thing to pull those fans of sports who now want to engage and experience sports with little action on it. And certainly probably even more so, more importantly, try to find those offshore players and bring them back into the ecosystem, because I think that has been one of the biggest hurdles that the current sportsbook is facing, with trying to pull all of those offshore bettors, at least in the United States, onto an onshore platform. I know every one of my friends who still bets in New Jersey still uses their bookie offshore.
Right, and the reason they do that is because either one, it's a tax question.
Very much so.
They don't have to pay taxes on their winnings. And that generally comes from the more experienced bettors, not the casual bettors. In reality, this is a sharks and minnows world. You don't have a lot of sharks out there, and you have a ton of minnows. And it's exactly why sportsbooks are making a killing. Because what they do with the sharks is they kick them off their book. If they're providing negative value to them, why is a sportsbook, would I have this extremely smart bettor who's just kicking my ass every weekend on my platform? I'm not. I'm going to kick him off. So if you want to bring in more casual bettors as a sportsbook model, I mean, this may sound like a silly answer, but I don't think they have to do much. They just have to keep doing what they're doing. And I see it over in the UK with what we're doing right now. So sportsbooks are dominating the casual bettor market, because those guys, let's be real here, not a lot of people know what they're doing in sports betting, and those are the guys who are going to flock to the sports book. It's too easy for them to grasp. It's the easiest layout. It hits them right in the face with what they want to do. Sportsbooks are designed like that on their user interface for them to hit users immediately with what they want to bet on. People want to be told what to bet on a lot of the time. So if you want to bring in more bettors and you want to differentiate your product, I think an easier place to start is with the higher level guys, not the casual guys. You bring those guys in and then you let it funnel down to the casual guys.
I think this conversation, if we're talking about sports books and operators, I think the reality in this post-PASPA world, in the US at least, is that there's so much money to be made outside of the sports book that if you're an operator, the focus of your business probably needs to be outside of the sports book and figure out how you can monetize that engagement and that fan experience outside of literally taking a bet from these quote-unquote casual fans. And when an operator speaks about casual fans, you're talking about the guy who doesn't care that he's paying negative 120 on a ball or strike, who eventually will figure out that's probably not the best experience for him to watch that game in the long run.
Right, but as a platform, you're not going to be able to have that market on a peer-to-peer exchange, going back to what we're talking about before, because you're just not going to have liquidity that quickly and on that niche of a market. It's a reality. It's the reason why Betfair doesn't offer those bets, because they're just losing money on those. It's just clutter. And it's the reason why a sportsbook can have that. It's the reason why you can have point-by-point betting on Bet365 when I'm sitting at the Davis Cup. It's the reason why you can bet on balls and strikes, because the sportsbook, they are the house. They can take it if they want. And like you said, they put minus 120 on there to juice it up, to create more vig, because in reality, they have no idea what the next pitch is going to be, so they're just playing the odds game. They're just
Which is another reason I think that these operators are ultimately going to have a harder time with new technology and new players coming in, because central risk management is almost an impossible task when you're asking them to put odds on balls and strikes. I think the Betfair model is certainly one to look at, but this is us now making the assumption that that's the best way to create this type of exchange model. I don't agree that what Betfair had put together 10 or 15 years ago is what ultimately is going to create a sports betting exchange, certainly in the US or even globally. And we think about all the new ways that technologies can come in and create different experiences and be more inclusive to those players who want to experience a more retail trading experience. If you look at what's happening in the United States, even after this past quarter, you have TD Ameritrade who brought in over 600,000 new users. You have E-Trade who brought in 300,000 new users this quarter. We know DraftKings, from their filing with the IPO, has 689,000 users monthly. That is across their DFS, that is across their online gambling, that is across their sports book. So when we talk about the ability to speak to that market where people are already engaging in markets, that is something that is understood. And it's a question of getting them into a sporting context to appreciate the market and appreciate the efficiency that Betfair does bring to the sports betting landscape.
What about Betfair's user interface and experience do you think won't be successful in the US?
Decimals, and it's very dry when you're looking at that interface. I think people look at it, well, even if it said negative 110, I would still say that the convention that they're using is not sustainable in the long run. I think if you walk down Main Street, no one knows what negative 110 means. No one knows what your money's going to win on plus 135. I think the first shift, if someone gave me keys to a sports book tomorrow, would be to begin the evolution into a percentage model to where you understand 60% to win is much easier to fully digest as a new and, like you say, casual user.
I completely disagree there. I think American odds and decimals are the easiest way to go about it. It's why sportsbooks use that. It's the reason they don't use percentages. If you want to go after percentages, go after the financially driven guys all you want. You're not going to make a market that way. But if you want to go after the casual guys, you're going to need minus 110. It's $110 to net 100. If you're looking at a decimal, and you can take care of that with a couple of onboarding slides on your app, 1, 2, 3 when you sign up. It's very easy to grasp.
Well, how many people of the million people who just signed up for retail sites across 2 providers are casual? You're saying none of those are casual fans? 1 million people in 3 months across E-Trade and TD Ameritrade?
That's not what I said. You're talking about odds and how we should look at them. If you're looking at a percentage market, how do I know how much money I'm going to make no matter what happens? It's a lot easier, and it's ingrained in our culture to look at odds. And you look at every other country in the world.
I think when you go to school and you grow up learning arithmetic, you're learning percentages. And I know if I buy something at 55 percentage or dollars and then sell it at 65 percentage or dollars, there's $10 to be made. You want to call it a percentage or you want to call it a unit, whatever you want to define it as, that is much simpler and easier to digest to the quote unquote casual fan in my
Look, that's your opinion. You can test that data all you want and you're going to see that you're wrong. And there's a reason why sportsbooks are out there with the odds that they have right now. But I guess we agree to disagree there.
Time will certainly tell for sure.
Yep.
Great. So that was all the time we have, but we do have time for one overtime question. So we're talking about sharks and minnows. We have big fish, small fish. What do you think? An early stage startup with not a lot of capital. What do they need to do to take a market share or build their own niche and build around this existing infrastructure? What would you say a smaller company needs to do now to carve out a niche in a very competitive landscape?
I think Scott and I will agree on this question, that we're not going to be able, or this point rather, that we're not going to be able to put our names on stadiums and jerseys like I keep referring to the UK, but it's what they're doing in the UK, and we are going to follow that model. We're not going to be able to afford the radio ads that DraftKings and FanDuel are putting their dollars towards. So what we're doing right now, and the most effective way that we've seen after we've measured our cost to acquire these guys, is you hit the affiliates who have followings of casual guys. So for example, in America, you have the talking heads like Rufus Peabody, you have Captain Jack, you have these guys who are getting shut out from PointsBet, from DraftKings, from FanDuel. They are always complaining about it. And the way that we plan to target our market and get guys on in a cheap way is we get the Rufuses and the Captain Jacks of the world. They come on, they use our platform. It's obvious benefit for them. They get better prices. They don't have any limits. And then we incentivize them for every customer that they refer. So if that's a $20, $30 charge, it's negotiable and it's different for everyone, but it's not the $1,000 that you're paying to get a customer in today's world. There's three ways that you compete in sportsbooks today. You compete on product, you compete on pricing, or you can compete on marketing. FanDuel and DraftKings, they have the product. Pricing, honestly, no one has right now. And marketing, right now, I've seen Bet America with $1,000 as your first bet. So, long-winded answer there, but I think it's with the affiliates. And that's how you lower your cost to acquire, and then that's how you ultimately compete with them.
Yeah, I would agree is that the reality is you don't try to compete with them. You're not going to be able to play their game, or at least play it well enough to be successful at it. We are not running a sports book. Our focus is right now on free to play, and our attack is really to leverage the long-term engagement that we're able to see intra-game to be able to turn around and bring brand sponsors in and allow them to leverage that engagement and create the ability to message, communicate, and then collect information to create a unique experience that brand can ultimately be a part of that specific event. For us, it's a model that those partners, through those partnerships, ultimately will pay us to acquire users through the ability to take that digital spend, use some of it as the prize pool and incentive for those players to come on and enjoy the experience. And then the other part of that is certainly we're able to take on and put against the ideal growth that we'd be able to see from being able to leverage not only the event, the experience, but the partner and their ability to influence and use their reach to do it.
Great. Well, there's been a phenomenal debate, gentlemen. And for all those listening, use the hashtag #DebateForCovid. Let us know who you think won this one. Other than that, great debate, and looking forward to see you all at the next round.
And let's introduce our judges. First up, Steve Ahern, principal at KB Partners. And next, Julian Fialco, senior investment associate at Drive by DraftKings. And lastly, James Santor, chief of staff at 76 Capital. Let's kick it over to our head referee, Nick.
All right, that was an amazing debate that we had with Scott and Dean for the sports betting and gambling Sweet 16 round. So now we're going to the judges for analysis and their picks. We're going to start with you, Steve. Who did you pick, and what is your analysis?
Well, things got a little bit of contentious there, and I thought they both had a lot of great points, but I ended up going with Dean here. I I think I agree with his early point that the current sports book model is here to stay in some way. I think that there's opportunities for people coming on and early stage startups to carve out some market share from the existing sports books, but I still think that they need to be there to address some of the liquidity issues that he had brought up. I also think kind of the where he won for me was kind of his last point on how casual sports or casual startups can carve out a piece of the market by going after unique distribution channels, going after the affiliate model. And I think, in this market where you're paying a lot for each user, the more you can do to create that unique distribution cycle and reduce CAC up front is how you're going to win early on.
I really appreciate that insight there. And Julian, if you could give your analysis on this round.
Yeah, kind of following up Steve, I thought it was a great debate. Both guys had clearly come prepared for it. I ended up choosing Scott over Dean. I thought they both had, really good, background ideas and where they thought the markets were going. I thought Scott did a really good job kind of talking about the new age of sports betting, kind of moving towards the DraftKings and FanDuels of the world, having more product offerings and user interface as well. And Dean actually said a point that you need to partner with that said betting operator on the ground, but Tennessee just launched online wagering only. You don't need to partner with an operator to be live in the state. So I think some of the states will kind of see the resources there and see the opportunity what Tennessee is doing, and maybe other states will kind of follow in the same footsteps, kind of going against a lot of Dean's points. So that's kind of why I came to my conclusion. I thought they both did a great job, and I'm excited to see the outcome.
Amazing. So now we're in an interesting situation. We have one vote for Scott, one vote for Dean, and now James will have the icebreaker on this one. So James, I know you're in a tough spot, but if you could give your analysis and then at the end of your analysis, give your pick, that would be much appreciated.
Absolutely. And, I kind of echo what Steve and Julian said about it being a great conversation, a really good debate. I think both sides made a lot of really good points. And, I think when you hear what they were saying, it makes you really excited about the future of sports betting. I think that's what I got out of all of this. And I think both guys are awesome. So looking forward to working with both of them in the future. As far as my decision here, it really did come down to the last question. I was like kind of half and half on the second question, and Dean won it for me when he talked about the three different things that the startups need to do to be successful, and that's the product, the pricing, the marketing. I really like the way that he outlined that of how they can be successful, and I think the way he talked about the product of DraftKings and FanDuel, they have the product, and look, they're going to be around forever. I liked that he made that clear, and it made it obvious. The pricing, I thought that was really interesting to talk about how Bet America is throwing $1,000 out there right now. And sorry, my phone is going off. And then for the marketing side, I think I really do believe what he said about the affiliate side of things. I think that's a really exciting opportunity for some of these startups to get a little bit cheaper of a user acquisition cost and a way to kind of really make a difference quicker. So I just thought Dean overall had a little bit more concise of an answer, and Scott was great as well, but Dean pulled it off at the end.
Great. Well, I appreciate that insight there. And that was a very good battle between both of the founders. Very close decision, and I appreciate all the insight. So congratulations, Dean. You're on your way to the Elite Eight. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you for that valuable insight to all the judges here.
Thanks for tuning in tonight. Hope you had some fun and learned a few things. Check back in with us tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for some more founder debate action, as well as every night this week at that same time. You can also follow the live bracket on the Pitch Madness website to see how founders progress throughout the tournament, as well as please continue to support our Pledge It campaign so we can raise money for the CDP COVID-19 Relief Fund, going again to support those frontline workers in the healthcare industry. Have a great evening. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks.